Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the International Black Summit interview podcast. The International Black Summit, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, is an organization that was created in 1991, and our purpose is to provide an opportunity for participants to bring into being their vision for the Black community and the world. I'm Grace Lawrence, and with me tonight is my co-host, Glenn Greenidge.
Good evening, good evening, good evening.
And our guest tonight is OLUBODE Shawn Brown. For those of you who are past participants of the International Black Summit, you may be familiar with OLUBODE. He is one of the amazing drafters of the Declaration of the International Black Summit. And he has gone on to create his own institute, really supporting people in creating lives that work for them and fulfilling on the visions that they create for themselves, their lives, their communities, and the world. So first I want to say a little bit about OLUBODE. I'm just going to read his biography here. So OLUBODE is hired by organizational leaders, entrepreneurs, and creatives to help them as they think through the complexities of their lives, businesses, and enterprises. He is the author of 2 books on well-being, life purpose, and balance. The first book being Bloom, The Essential Journey, a new guide to balance, growth, and well-being. And the second book is Finding Your Big, Your B.I.G, Finding New Purpose in Changing Times. So in these books, he introduces a new way of thinking and asking fundamental questions based on the 5 elements that grow and balance life. This body of thought is called the philosophy of blooming. He is currently the thought leader in residence at the AWO Hub, a global collective of creatives based in Accra, Ghana. He is the founder of Bloom Education Institute, where he offers coaching and guidance, online and in-person courses, keynotes, and corporate consulting. His most recent project is Bloomfest, a global festival by and for creatives. It's the 2nd year this festival is a year-long celebration. The festival is created by creatives and benefits its creators. He currently is in the process of building Create Space, a global community of Black creatives worldwide. Here, members network and offer free peer-led creative collabs, online and in-person meetups, presentations, and workshops. His work is focused on working with diverse leaders who are thinking collectively, working cooperatively, and acting globally in the fields of well-being and mental health, social justice, economic empowerment, equity, and community development. His B.I.G is to create a self-sustaining ecosystem of social enterprises that impacts 5 million lives in Africa and its diaspora in 2023. OLUBODE spends his time between Accra, Ghana, New York City, Los Angeles, California, and the island of Jamaica. So let's bring OLUBODE in and then have him with us as we go and look at the declaration, given that he was one of the drafters of that document. So OLUBODE, if we could
go ahead and start your video, OLUBODE.
Okay, great. And let's just spotlight you. Great.
There you go.
And have you unmute so we can hear you.
Thank you, Jackie Grace. Thank you, Glenn, for having me on. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here. It's an honor.
It's an honor to have you. And let's jump it right into the declaration where things started back in 1991. And for those of you who don't know, OLUBODE was here from New York. There was about 8 of us from New York that were at that first International Black Summit. And OLUBODE was one of the chief drafters of the declaration that was established for the International Black Summit inside of the International Black Summit and was done overnight. So we had sessions that day to come up with some different areas of expertise that we wanted to include, that we were about economic development, relationships, nurturing relationships, youth, media, all of those things that you'll hear in the declaration. But this was crafted after the session, and OLUBODE and a smaller group of people actually created the wordsmithing of this document. And this document lives as our mantra, as our way of being, as our vision for the world. So with that, I'm going to read you now the Declaration of International Black Summit.
You could just get closer to your mic, Glenn.
Okay. The Declaration of the International Black Summit. We declare ourselves, our community, and all communities whole and complete. There is nothing to do except be. We assert that we are responsible for generating community as possibility and distinction. We listen for and grant being to the possibility and creation of unpredictable results. Our conversation of, about, and for those of African descent is one of power, self-generation, abundance, responsibility, unity, and integrity with the possibility of being. We stand for the expression of our spirituality, ending the murders of our men, women, and children, building economies responsible for funding our community, maintaining wellness of being in our bodies, providing human services, establishing nurturing relationships, altering the conversation of who we are in the media, empowering our youth. We declare that our community manifests itself in the world as a contribution in the transformation of the universe. Atlanta, Georgia, October 7th, 1991. So that's the Declaration of the International Black Summit, and we use it as part of our starting and ending of our sessions to make sure that we're grounded inside of the vision that was created at the first International Black Summit in 1991 in Atlanta, Georgia. So, OLUBODE.
Yes.
The drafters, the wordsmithers, the creative genius, clearly that you continue to contribute and generate. How does it sound 30 some odd years later?
Well, the first thing to acknowledge is that, I sat in the room and I heard what felt like a declaration. And I was invited to the summit to be part of a constitutional declaration, a moment that was akin to the coming together, the formation of the Constitution of the United States. I mean, that was the urgency of the decision. So I was in the space like, this is a seminal moment for Black people, and this was a convocation pretty much. So my listening was at that level. And that's how the space was held, and that was a frequency in the space. And so those words floated into my memory and the memory of folk who were gathered there. And I was in a position to catch strands of it. And when I caught the strand, I reflected it back to the room that I'm hearing this declaration that's emerging from the conversation. And so that's how it's happened. I'm not the architect of it. I'm listening, and given the context, that was the call out that went out during that period of time, that was the frequency of the listening. So that a declaration emerged from that space is just a part of life giving birth to itself. And so I might have heard it, yeah. And then other people heard pieces of it. And there was a time in the night when we were tired to write it out. And, I keep telling the story, but I'll tell it again. I really wasn't up for that. I wasn't up for the all-nighter. We're in Atlanta. I wanted to party. So I went out. I was like, I'm done. You're not keeping me up here till 4 o'clock in the morning. And some folk were there. I remember, a young lady from Chicago, Charles Robinson, Courtney Kazembe, and others were there, and they labored through the night. And then in the morning, we met again for breakfast. Said, oh, that's okay. That sounds good. And then I happened to be the one that went on stage to facilitate and to build consensus. But there were other people in that room, like Pat Reed Porter and Barbara from Detroit, who were at that point doing the communication course, and, the possibility of being, that wasn't a language that I had. That was coming directly out of the work that so many people in that room had done. So the work was chiseled right there in the morning session, and that's how it emerged. So it was a collective listening for the possibility of who we are as Black people in the world. So that's as truthful a telling of what happened there that I offer. Yeah.
Well, I want to add one thing, that the International Black Summit is about listening to space. And so you're in the space, listening to space and feeding it back. And consistently, for those of you who have not attended the International Black Summit, we don't lead from a manual. We are in the conversation with you, listening to the conversation, listening for the pearls, the agitation, the conflicts that arise in us as people of Black Africa. Listening for what is wanting to be spoken, what is wanting to be cleared up, which is another one of our distinctions, clearing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into the day. Go ahead, Jackie Grace, you had a question?
I did. I was, unlike the two of you, I was not at that first event. And one of the things that I'm curious about is how did you find out about the event? How did you become involved in the whole process? Were you at any of the pre-meetings, like all of that kind of lead up stuff to your first International Black Summit event?
Well, thank you for that, Jackie Grace. The thing is that the International Black Summit, as a call went out, came out of a particular historical period in time. And so for me, I was 31 years old. I'd been in New York at 24. Many of my friends up to that point had passed from the AIDS epidemic. Arne and I were working in a Black-owned enterprise that was strongly about self-empowerment in the Black community. This was a period in which Spike Lee came of age, Biggie Small, the whole hip hop movement was happening. So we're very mindful, for Arne and I, what we were engaged in at the time with this business that had so much tremendous promise. Bill Lester, Ademola Mandela was the owner, and it was a cooperative collective business right there in the heart of Brooklyn with 3 stores. I was the business manager, Arne was the bookkeeper. And so we were in the middle of a ferment. Al Sharpton was right beside us at the Slave Theater, and we were dressing to the nines every day, going to work in the highest fashion that Ademola Mandela could put on us at the time. So we were Black, we were empowered. I just didn't completed the forum. I think it might have been a year and a half after that. So when this arrived, and I don't remember the exact words, Arne probably does, but it was, Glenn, you probably do too. It was something about you better be there under the pain of death in your body.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And but it
Oh,
resonated.
I think I've heard that. You better be the only thing is what? Is death in your body? It's the only thing that should prevent you from being at that first
Yeah.
event.
Yeah,
Yes.
somebody should get their hands on that, because that is a tone and the urgency. And so when we set up a tone and an urgency like that, then whatever drops out. So the summit really is a dropping out of that call. And it was really frequenced very, very highly. So when Arne and I saw it, and then I think it probably first came to Padeg, and Roy Brown was circulating it in New York, we're like, we got to be there. So I jumped on a plane, and Arne and I, we scrambled together, got our resources together, and we stayed in Dr. Roy Brown's room. And it's important to call Roy Brown's name, because he was one of the elders that made it possible for Arne and I to be there and holding the space for the summit during its formative years. And so when we showed up there, we showed up like, we're in charge, So a lot of what you're experiencing came from a particular historical moment. It wasn't, the summit was a product of the early 90s, the birth of hip hop and Blackness, and much of what we're seeing in the world today as we step into Black Lives Matter, really, that early 90s, 1991, 92 was really a threshold for that kind of thing. We were really ready to go. And still are.
You mentioned PADEG. Glenn, if you just want to, I don't remember what that acronym stands for.
People of African Descent Empowerment Group. We're out of New York, and we were working out of Landmark's New York area center. And what we were Black folks that were organizing ourselves using the technology of Landmark education to promote and get trained so that we could bring the work back to our community. And so, of course, when this call came out, we had been working together for probably about a year, or earlier that year. And so for us to get the call, actually they called me, um, Kenneth Young, J. Kenneth Young actually directed the invitation to me, because he said Glenn is in New York, and that we had done some work together inside of Landmark. So he sent it to me to distribute, and we had, as OLUBODE Shawn Brown has said, is that we were already organizing ourselves inside of Landmark, and we were doing introductions. By the way, we started the first guest introductions. We actually started that. Angie Carson was the person that actually created that. And so we had Kwanzaa at the area center. We had all of these things that were kind of bubbling up. So when the summit came through, it was like, oh, heck yeah, we got to be part of this. There's no way we're going to miss out. And so we showed up, as I said, eight of us showed up to that particular event. So back to you.
So curious, OLUBODE, as you go to that event and you become part of the drafting team, part of the body listening for what was present in the space, and then documenting it to create the declaration. After that, my understanding is that there was eventually the creation of a facilitator body that you became a part of. What was your journey from that first event to becoming a participant, an active participant as a facilitator of the International Black Summit? I mean, obviously you facilitated the drafting of the declaration, so you were a facilitator in that sense from the get-go.
Well, let's pause for a moment and acknowledge the facilitators, Catherine and Robin and Perry and
Anthony and JK.
Randall. JK wasn't in there as yet.
Not until the end
at
of
the
the
first
first
summit.
one, right?
Yeah. So when I walked into the room and saw these giants on stage, these are people who had done major work with Werner Earhart. They had led seminars inside of Werner Earhart and Associates. I mean, I was a year and a half, 2 years, just did the forum and the forum in action. So, to see, Black folks standing there in front of me, having just come from Jamaica at 24, and seeing us take possession of our space, and the whole way in which the summit at the time was negotiating with Landmark, whether or not to be part of Landmark, and, us standing up for ourselves. These facilitators, really were my role models. And so there's a transmutation of energy and of being that they demonstrated that as a young man, 31 years old, looking at these folk really standing in their power, there's something powerful that's transmuted. And so I don't remember consciously making a choice to be in the facilitator body. I remember I went to the planning meetings, and then Glenn, at some point, Jackie, you'll appreciate the planning meeting morphed into the facilitator body. And then all of a sudden I was in the facilitator body, but it was something that I was avoiding pretty much, for other reasons that we can get into. But yeah, I don't know that I consciously had a desire to be a facilitator, to be on stage facilitating the conversation. But what I'm saying is that there was a transference of being, in the way the space was held, and facilitation. Anyone at the summit can facilitate from where they were. And essentially facilitation, as I understand in the summit, as Glenn just said, it was really about listening for the room and making welcome everything that showed up in the room, to see what was there. So I became trained just by simply being in those rooms where those conversations were being had.
You're muted, Jackie.
Thank you. In terms of being in the space and being trained just by being in the space, I do actually want to get into some of the things that might have had you resist being a facilitator. I do want to get into that, but not quite yet. First, I want to ask you about being trained, and how you have used that training in your life or in your work, or, like when you think of what you were trained in, how has that had an impact on your life, and how do you use it consciously? Do you use it unconsciously? Like, what do you see in that kind of area?
Well, for most of my life professionally, as a coach, facilitator, consultant, party promoter, lawyer, author, I have made most, if not all of my money, 99% of it, from working with people of African descent all over the world. So, the summit was just a demonstration of what happens when you get Black folk together and ask us to work together towards a given end. And so it was always trying to get all the ducks in the row. I remember at the end of each summit trying to decide where the next summit was going to be and what alignment felt like. And it was a discourse in the mind. So there was no embodiment, there was no breathing, no quiet meditation, no nothing. And so part of it, as a young person watching that, how do we get, folk coming from different cultural backgrounds, living inside of a huge possibility. And when you live inside of a huge possibility, for myself, I know it's very triggering. So everything that's unhealed within us is going to come up. So when you send out a declaration like that, declare our community and all communities whole and complete, everything that's incomplete is going to bubble up to the surface. So the way in which those processes took place really is part and parcel of how I think of the work that I'm doing in Africa, here in New York City, and the work I'm doing around the world. How do I create that alignment? And at the point, where do I strike the balance between listening for the group and saying, here's where we're going? It's a little different because the summit is collectively owned. Bloom is very clearly centered around my vision. And so there comes a point in how do I listen for the alignment, and how do I check in with people who have spend time listening for that alignment with me and saying, this is direction that that we need to go, and calling it. So there's a balancing act going on. You know, in the summit, no one person can say this is, I mean, Lord knows you've tried. I've tried. It doesn't work. So I actually have learned how to balance both dynamic, you know, and created the ownership structure and the decision-making structures that allow for things to move forward within the context that we're working on something that's really big and impossible. And all that triggering is going to get driven up in the space. And so the tools of the summit, in particular, there is no out there, and understanding what's triggering you out there is in there, is inside, has been very helpful. And it's a deepening distinction that I continue to deepen. In my own work now, we say my body is in me, you know, so it has kind of morphed into that. But watching that process unfold. So the summit is and continues to be for me a laboratory in which I observe and I learn, just observing and being in the process.
Yeah, let me just for the folks who have not been at an International Black Summit, um, OLUBODE Shawn Brown just spoke to alignment and no out there. Those are part of the distinctions that we use. Now, yes, those are regular words in the English language, but we use them in a particular way so that we can stay present, so that we use them to, so alignment is that nothing moves forward until everybody is spoken to, has their objections heard, so that the group moves forward in a particular manner that's consistent with the entire group. And so the alignment that OLUBODE has spoken to is and still exists as one of the major distinctions for decision making inside of the International Black Summit. And I must say that I've been part of lots of different organizations, and I've never had an organization that considered and included everybody before they would move forward in decision making. And so it also has some downfalls in terms of moving quickly, but you have the consensus of the entire body. The no out there distinction is that whatever you think is happening out there is really happening inside of you. And so we also have another distinction called trigger. And a lot of people triggers in the mainstream of conversation, but how we use trigger is something that we're unable or unwilling to be with. And anytime that you lay out a particular possibility or alignment or a vision, and again, the International Black Summit works around people getting clear what their vision is, and inside of that vision, take action consistent with that vision. So all of these distinctions are there to help you not be stopped by day-to-day living, by being triggered, by somebody saying something to you. So you actually use the work to keep yourself present and focused on what you're committed to. Back to you.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you. So I actually want to get into something that you touched on earlier, OLUBODE, when you talked about being resistant to being a facilitator. So I want to touch on that. And then I want to actually talk to you about the work that you're doing now and some of what, and how that may or may not connect to your participation in the summit. But first, the resistance. I'm just curious when you said that there were some things that maybe were holding you back or having you resist being a facilitator at that time. I'm just curious, do you recall what any of those things were?
Well, the space is very triggering and the processes are very long, you know. So I didn't have the patience for that, you know, I really didn't. And so that's me, you know, me dealing with that. How do I sit in a conversation long enough to keep listening? And so those are personal things. And then it's a vocabulary. And, I love words and vocabulary. And so, you know, I guess the inspiration I took from that was like, okay, great, that could have been said differently. um, but the facilitator body, I remember Joe Hampton and Carla Hampton. You remember them, Glenn?
Of course. Yes.
Joe is a complete model of what it takes to be in a space like the International Black Summit. And I remember that Joe would just sit in the space and just listen and laugh. And, at the end of it, he just laugh. And I always remember Joe. I was not like Joe. Very few people are like Joe. Joe and Carla would just sit there, keep each other's company and laugh and just enjoy themselves and listen. And so anything, Jackie Grace, that would have stopped me being a facilitator was the gap between where Joe Hampton was and where I was. At the time. So it was not a reflection of the summit process. It was just just how my own process in transformation. Now I think I'd have a little bit more patience, a little bit more joy, sitting and observing. Now that I've become a little bit more of an elder, probably like, okay, let me sit and listen to this for a while. Okay.
Well, it also speaks to what all that you've created as well. And so you've now taken a body of work and you've now honed it to your own personal viewpoints. You've added your flavor, the OLUBODE Shawn Brown flavor to it, and you've created a set of entities, not just one, a set of entities that have your DNA on it, that are also consistent with the vision of the declaration that you helped craft, as well as creating your own vision for your work. So let people know a little bit about what you've created over the years, because I mean you've created. I remember you remember the game that you created. Remember you had the.
Can I say one quick thing before you share that, OLUBODE? Because for me, what you're about to share is for me part of the summit purpose. The summit being to provide an opportunity for participants to bring into being their vision for the Black community and the world. And how I personally hold that is that the summit can be and often is an incubation space where people come in, they clear themselves, they get present to what their vision is and what they're committed to, and then they can go out into the world and cause and create that. And so for me, I feel like that's something that you've done in many different ways. You used the summit as an opportunity to clear and be present and to connect and to refine perhaps your vision, and then to go out into the world and create it. So let's hear what you've created over the years.
Well, but let's say this first, that the summit has been the space in which I've been most affirmed, seen and heard. It's been a sourceful space for me. As much as I've been triggered in the space, I can be in the summit and feel complete as a human being in terms of my potential. There's no one limiting my potential. And to receive that kind of affirmation from other brilliant Black people, in which we are all winning, gives one the confidence. And so I'm being birthed in an ecosystem that has affirmed me completely. So with that, I can go into the world and do whatever. It's like, okay, great. The summit got me. I'm good to go. So Bloom is created principally as a way of healing my own trauma and my own triggers around growing up in Jamaica, invisible, working class, without access. And so it gives me an opportunity to be in the world and to be seen authentically as who I am. So it's a space that I created for myself to be able to show up as fully myself, as authentically myself. And then I take that space and I offer it to other people who want to be in a space where they can show up authentically as themselves. And so when I do the work of Bloom, it's offered in the spirit of remember who you are. You know, you can show up authentically as yourself. And so in that regard, it's healing for them as well. So I'm making sure that in offering Bloom, it's also a healing journey for myself. So it's, you know, it's not just simply because you know, I want to, you know, be a good person and do right by my community. The vision that I carry is a vision that includes myself, my own wellness, my own authenticity. And so everyone who comes in contact with Bloom is held in the same way. This is a place where you can be at home, where you can feel connected, where you can hear yourself, where you can be authentic in your own self-expression. And so that's what Bloom is. It grew out of vision. It grew out of a vision that was birthed from my own trauma in life. And it says, a space where every gift is delivered, every journey is celebrated, and all are free. And that includes me.
Mm.
So tell,
Gorgeous. Can you repeat that? Every gift celebrated. Can you
Where
repeat that?
every gift is delivered, every journey is celebrated, and all are free.
Oh, beautiful.
so
I love that.
that is great. Give us tell us a little bit more about the kind of activities that are organized by Bloom that so if I were wanted to join Bloom or to
Mhm.
participate with the activities of Bloom, what kind of activities would I be engaged in?
Well, the all our courses are now online, and we have three courses, three level of courses. The first is finding your big, which is the premise of our work. Everybody carries within them a big impossible goal that's birthed out of our trauma, our passions, our talents, and our gifts. And so we have a journey that helps each of us to get in touch with what that big is. So my big for this year is to impact 5 million lives in 2023 through the philosophy of blooming. And so that goal will make you like, how am I going to do that? So again, it's a journey that's going to trigger us. It triggers me. So the nervous system goes into this kind of thing, and then we deal with that. So there's several steps beyond that. How do we bring some calm? How do we work through bring some embodied practices to calm down our nervous system, our anxiety, and to be able to move forward? But it begins with finding your big. So in finding your big, you're going to go like, I have a big, and then sometimes people get despondent. It's too big. I don't want to, you know, we go through all of that kind of stuff. So that program is online. It's offered through our website at bloomedication.institute. And there you can access the course online. It's a 10 video series. Eventually this year, we're going to do it in person because for the pandemic, I did it in person in Accra 3 or 4 times. I've done it on WhatsApp with people. So it's done in different forms. If you're going to do one-on-one coaching with me, we're still going to do it one-on-one. So it is the seminal journey in Bloom. And then after that, we have the intensive journey. And the intensive journey is 10 of our core distinctions. And the first one is Bloom meditation. We engage there in the process of just being still and being aware that we are each spiritual beings having a human journey. And that's when we start with, you know, my body is in me. And the first 5 declarations are, I can hear myself. I can feel myself changing. I can see myself. I'm connected to all life. I am home. And so when you have a big, just like the declaration, Glenn and Jackie Grace, that's how we start our mornings. That's how we start all our programs. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. We can hear ourselves, and each person has the ability to hear themselves. So the intensive was given before the pandemic, during the pandemic and before that for about 3 or 4 years. So there are people who have done cycles of the intensive. Right now, we're busy putting the intensive online in video courses and all of that kind of great stuff. And so there are guides who have been trained to lead the intensive and also the Finding Your Big program. I see Jake is on here. She's involved with that process. My brother Kweku Art in Accra is trained to lead Finding Your Big and the Intensive. And so is Chantal George. She's a psychotherapist, a drama therapist working here in New York City. So there's been a collective of people who are trained to deliver these distinctions. So those are the training programs. There's also the collective leaders journey that we're developing now. So there's 3 levels: finding your big, how do you keep yourself balanced, and the collective leaders journey is how do you work with others to create a collective ecosystem that keeps moving forward. So those are the 3 journeys. That's on the education side. But the great thing now, we're doing Bloomfest. And the clients, I've come to realize that our clients are creatives and not just artists. I mean, I've worked with a lot of artists over the years in Los Angeles, here in New York, in Jamaica, in Africa, but creativity is the essence of human beings. So each of us are creative beings. And so our work is premised on supporting people who are bringing new value into the world, specifically people who are going through the terror and the excitement of birthing something new, whether you're in a corporate job or you're in a community organization, or you're an artist creating something really beautiful. There's terror and there's excitement attached to it. And we want to be there to support that journey as well. So that's why we do Bloomfest. And that happened in Accra last year. And it's happening here in New York on the 21st to the 26th of June. And also we're going back to Accra August 1 through 26 of this year.
So tell us a little bit more about these collectives, because you mentioned the education, but isn't there also kind of like a business? So if I had an idea for a product or something that I wanted to create, there's an opportunity for me to kind of launch that inside of this collective.
Yeah, that's called Create Space. It's a collective that, well, we've always existed in that format, whether it is a WhatsApp group or on Facebook or in the meetups that we have or in the actual courses. People are always collaborating with each other. So whether it is we're throwing a party or we're doing a festival or doing any event, it's a collaborative event. And what we ask as you come to the event is, what are you working on and how can you use this as a platform to get what you are up to in the world done? What is your win in this? So no one is volunteering. We're just offering an open platform. Here's what we're doing. We're doing festivals, we're doing events. Now tell us, how does your participation in this get to forward what you're up to as your big? So the other thing, Glenn, it's not everybody coming with an idea. We don't do that. We ask the question, what is your big?
So inside of your big, you really are discovering what it is that you're up to. And inside of that discovery, you're supported to the next level.
Yeah, because there are a lot of ideas, but we also want to hear, what are you healing for yourself? So it's not wash your foot and come. So the space is like this, so we can listen to know when someone has a big and when someone really has not really excavated the urgency and what they're healing for themselves. So the big either floats to the top or it goes whichever it goes, because you're speaking to an ecosystem that's frequenced in a particular way. So when you share out what you're doing, people hear it and say, oh, yeah, I want to do that. I see the reason you're doing that. And there are facilitators or guides in the space that are listening. What is this healing for yourself? What is the story you're telling about what you're doing? So it's a frequency of the speaking that we're listening to. So when I say, okay, 5 million P creatives supported by the philosophy of blooming, other big people hear that. So my friend Kweku can hear that. Sekou can hear that in New York City. And so he jumps in there with his filmmaking. Kweku is in the UK and he's talking, hey, here's what we're doing. We're building a community of 5 million people. So it resonates with him because he's already operating at a frequency where his impact is also in the millions. You see? So we hear and we echo each other back based on the big. So because it's a spoken frequency, and we're learning to embody it, then what happens, it begins to take on momentum in the space. So we're listening for the frequency of the speaking. So, it's not help, it's not come help me support me. It's kind of like, what's the frequency you're bringing? And then when you bring that frequency, we jump on because you're riding waves of frequency based on the speaking. So what happens when you have a big, you're elementally calibrating your bone, your trauma, and excavating your voice. Your passion is air, your fire is your talents, the water is your gift. What's the gift you're making that's healing? And the big is like that measurable impact. So when you speak, and when you practice that long enough, there's a frequency to it. And so the community vibrates on the frequency of who is speaking a big. And so we're riding that. And when people jump on a big, they're jumping on, yes, I want to use this as a platform to support my big as well. So in the festival, people are building it by pursuing their own big. So it's just an open space in which anybody can jump on that has a big and say, oh, I'm coming to Accra because I want to do a performance because it's going to support my big. My friend Emix did that. I needed a whole video of himself, and now he took it back to New York and used that to raise money. And, I come back to New York, he's like, oh, look, but hey, I'm expanding massively, because he used a big that was spoken, jumped on it, created something else, and took it somewhere else. That's what we call blooming.
So one of the things that I find intriguing about what you're sharing around the big is the connection that you're making between the big impossible goal and each individual's healing. And so I want to ask a little bit more about that. You spoke about it for yourself, about how what you're creating is also part of your own healing journey.
Mm-hmm.
And as you look, and as the Bloom Institute's different courses and opportunities support participants, it sounds like it's always going back to that connection between your own healing journey and the fulfillment of the vision that you're given, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm just wanting to, I think, have you speak a little bit more about that, or perhaps give some examples, some additional examples about how that connection is, that connection needed to provide the fuel for the vision. I mean, and really distinguishing it from past ways of being, right? Distinguishing it from charity, distinguishing it from I don't know, enterprise, but distinguishing it from other ways of being, and how this because there's something I think very deep in it that for me feels like the new world that's being asked to be birthed. And so I'm just interested in hearing a little bit more about those connections.
Jackie Grace, you really know how to get to the nitty gritty, don't you? It's
As much as you're comfortable sharing.
It's a beautiful question, but it's very important because here we have in the declaration, we declare our community as whole and complete, yet we are committed to ending the murder of our men, women, and children. Yet here's a young man who gets brutally murdered, so it's standing in, here's my big, and here's what's present now. And then when we think of the question that the summit has now, which is what's available standing in I am, what's available in standing in I am complete, and here I am with 5 million people as a goal to impact, right? And I look now and I see, okay, but I only have this level of impact. These are the resources that I have in my hand. How do I stand in that gap inside of I am? There's nothing to do but be. And I think that's the question you're asking. How do we close that gap? So imagine that there is Jesus having to feed the 5,000. And imagine that that's a big, right? And a young man came up to him and he had, was it 5 loaves and 2 fishes? And what did Jesus do? He took the 5 loaves and 2 fishes and he said, Father, I thank you that this is enough. And then he started to break it, and then he shared it. And then somebody else brought something else, and then before you know it, and then the story came that he fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. He began with what he had in his hand, and he gave gratitude for it. So in every person I speak to, there is 5 million there. So I'm present to that the resources that I have is enough. And so for me, it's a continual sense of gratitude and appreciation for what is now. So the 5 million is accessible through this particular moment. And so each time when I go jump out of my body and think that 5 million is going to make me look good and I'm going to be ashamed if I don't get to the 5 million, then anxiety starts. And so it's a continual process, because when you set that big out there, it's a training device, it's a practice. So I've declared that as a practice so that I can ground myself in the present moment of appreciation. And that's where the work is, that's where the practice is. And I think I underestimated earlier the level of vigilance and care that I have to take for myself to stay away from the terror and to live in the present moment. And it means getting up in the morning, and it means, staying off the internet. First thing I hear Ricky Byers say, trusting the gift within, trusting the love I know. I step with greater faith into the world I go. And I play this for 5 minutes. I get on my yoga mat. I take a breath and remind myself I'm a spiritual being having a human journey. Then I say the mantra, and then I put on my coffee, and then I breathe. I do my yoga, and then I start bouncing around, and then my energy comes up. I actually do things to shift my mood, to tap into my intuition, to remember who I am. That's the practice. I then imagine, how do I want my day to, all my goals are written out in all the 5 years of my life, and I say it. There's a whole Bob Proctor practice now. I'm so happy and grateful now that I'm earning XYZ. I'm retraining my nervous system because I'm literally breaking the paradigm. So I say that in the morning when I got, I'll say tonight before I go to bed, to remind myself what I'm present to, so that the goals that I have are a presence right now until they live. They just come out of my mouth like that. Things just start to appear. But it's a practice. It's not, this is us being responsible for the abilities that we have. We can hear, we can taste, we can smell. We also have 5 inner senses. We have memory. Those are God-given higher faculties. We have the ability to embody change, to choose to embody change. I have the ability to imagine and choose the life that I want. I have the ability to connect, to change perspective, and to exercise compassion. I have the ability to intuit my next move. And so that training those senses is a practice. And so that's how I move between the terror and the excitement of having a big.
Staying present.
Yeah. And it's an embodied practice. The thing with transformation in Landmark's version is that, and I have to be careful here, is that a lot of the work is not embodied. It's in thinking. And there comes a point where, I have had to deal with the nervous system, and understand, all of that new science that they're learning, and get into breath work, get into yoga, get into stillness, get into meditation, get into movement, get into daily study and reading widely across many disciplines of transformation. So I can read Deepak Chopra in one move, and I can read Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. I can go back and read Eckhart Tolle, listen to what Deepak is saying, listen to what the guy is saying about, the latest science. But consciously training myself and developing my mental faculties, understanding emotion, that I can feel and acknowledge emotion, but I can use emotion as an indicator for what I need and be able to ask for what I need without having to mess up everybody. So these are practices. So having a big is not an easy thing. It's a courageous step. That's an invitation to transformation. Yeah.
Just a curious question for me. Very fascinating and beautiful, beautiful. And something that I'll probably be going on your website after this interview. But question that popped in my mind is whether or not spirit speaks to you, and if so, how?
Synchronicities. I'll be writing something, and at the same time that I'm writing the word life, something on the TV says life. And that's how I know I'm in the right place and the right position. You know, it's getting on the phone with Orin and saying, Orin, help, you know, and things show up in my bank account. You know, that keeps me moving forward. It's those synchronicities when I know that life is speaking. And so, you know, it starts for me with listening first to myself and an understanding that the universe is consistently blooming through each of us, and resting in that. And that's a practice. And then as I realize that, I watch for the synchronicities, I watch how things unfold. It's kind of like in the summit, you know, you listen for the alignment, you know, and there's something that's speaking through each of us, if we'd only give it our attention. And who that it is us. You know, when I say God is speaking to me, like spirit exists in all pronouns and in all, you know, all verbs. So when I say, you know, I can listen to myself say, I hear you, I hear what you're saying, I hear you. But the you I'm saying is the I. The you I'm saying is the I am, because I exist in every pronoun. You know, I exist in I amness, I am existing, I'm doing, I am is having. So I can always dwell in the I am, even as I'm doing and as I'm having.
Let me
I,
ask let me ask you this. This year's inquiry is, as I become present to I am, what is it to rest in the I amness? Now you've heard and participated in a lot of the inquiries, the questions that we've had over the years. What does this particular inquiry, because I hear you pointing to the I am and the I amness. What is this year's inquiry inside the International Black Summit? How do you relate to that?
Give me the inquiry again, Glenn. Is what's
As I become present to I am, what is it to rest in the I amness?
well, let's just rest in the I amness for a moment here.
Absolutely.
I am is hearing. I am is seeing. I am is feeling itself change. I am is feeling its connection to all life. I am in every moment is arriving home. I am, that's I am in action. I am is grateful for all that I can hear. I am is grateful for all I can see. I am is grateful for all I have. So I amness gives access to the doingness of the exercising of who we are, as hearing, as seeing, as changing, as arriving home, as connection. And I amness is able to be grateful. And so there is no struggle in that. You know, once I can live in that, once we can live inside of that, inside of gratitude, and inside of appreciation that all that we hear is I am. All that I see is I am. It's a wonderful inquiry. I think I love that the summit is doing this, because it's at the root of our work when we say there's nothing to do except be. But there's a mischief in it, in the sense that, you know, everything that we desire, you can set a goal and have that be an expression of yourself without feeling that you have to do anything. because the desires that I have for my life are part of I am seeking its own expression. So I'm not ashamed of my goals, the amount of money I want to make, the kind of lifestyle I want to live, you know, where I want to live, all of that. I hear it as I amness, wanting to exercising its imagination to see what it wants to experience. And so the more I'm at ease with my own desires, without thinking that I have to now do something to deserve it and make it happen, I can just say, yeah, that's what I want this year. I'm present to earning X amount of money. You know, I'm so happy and grateful now that that's happening. I'm so happy and grateful now, you know, that the people I work with are prospering financially and increasing their lifestyles 100-fold, you know, and I live in that space of gratitude. The practice is to live in that space of gratitude. Yeah, so I am is doing, and I am is doing with all the facility and faculties that is I am, hearing, changing, appreciating itself.
You know what I hear? I hear you getting rid of the guilt, the trauma that you know, that we've been carrying around undistinguished as such. And when you can get to the essence of who you are, all of that kind of just falls away. But you're right, it's a practice to stay in it, to keep it being present. So you've actually created a support system to be able to keep you inside of that conversation, focused, present, and moving forward inside of the directions that you want to create for yourself.
And working with other people too, because that's part of it, who are in that practice as well. You know, there's something, a line in the Bible that says, or I don't know, somewhere you can pray a prayer greater than what God wants for you. So you can relax, you know, you can dream anything you want, imagine any life you want. You can't pray a prayer greater than what God wants for you. So hey, go for it.
Go for it. That's right. That's right. Absolutely.
Is there a connecting to what God wants for you in this exploration or inquiry in this work? Are you creating what's there, or are you listening for what God wants for you or wants you to create? If
Well,
there's a distinction there.
the listening is always inside of, I'm being created as an expression of life right now. And so life, this is part of the structure. Life wants to be heard. Life wants to change and evolve. Life wants to be seen. Life wants to connect. Life wants to belong, to be safe. And those, I understand, are desires of consciousness. And so this is where we get a little bit into how Bloom has languaged the desires of life. And so that's the philosophy of blooming. And it's based on the 5 elements of nature, because minerals hold a memory, things. Air, sometimes called nature, holds our ability to change. Fire, our need and ability to see. That's what gives seeing. Water gives touch, where we touch each other and can calm each other down emotionally. You know, that's water energy. Life wants to connect. Taste, the whole idea of being fed and nourished and feeling at home. So I understand life to be that. So in everything that I desire, I'm like, oh yeah, life wants to be heard here. Life wants to write this book. You know, life wants me to show up here, you know, get myself together and and to speak to you and to interact here with everyone in such a way that you might hear something, it's life speaking to life. Some memory, I remember that about myself. So I show up to life, you know. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know if you've noticed that some of my questions have been coming from my own my
It's
right?
okay.
My
It's
own,
lovely.
like, I get, how do I map this onto me? Because I have
Yeah.
this thing where it's like my mind versus my body, or my mind versus my heart.
What year were you born? What's the last digit of your birth year?
7.
Seven, fire energy. Okay, good. So I was checking because there's a part that we got from Dagara in West Africa, and the last digit of your birth year tells us a little bit about, your psycho-spiritual disposition, and you're born in a fire year. So you're a big, people get behind you because you're blazing your way through things. You're kind of like the woman with the torch.
Really?
you know.
I haven't had that. Sometimes people get behind me. I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. Why are you
Very
lining up
But you
behind
are.
me?
But you are. See, that's the thing.
And then be careful because you're gonna get burned if the shit ain't together. It's a little bit like a truth telling. I don't know if you if you can own that, Jackie Grace, but you tell the truth. You can be trusted to tell the truth.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's just kind of like so that I grabbed from the Dagara tribe. Again, they see the world in 5 elements, and so for each year there's an element of nature, and so we're able to, like, I ask Ben, what year you born in. So one of the questions we ask when I'm starting to coach, so I can get a kind of read on where someone is, but I'm constantly listening through the frameworks of the 5 elements of nature, to whoever I'm interacting with, the space, and all of that kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you. Well, I have to say we have 2 questions that we have on our list. I'm looking at the big questions, Glenn. And we often don't ask these questions.
Okay.
We have them as potential questions, but we often don't get to them, don't ask them. I'm going to read both of them, and I'm going to invite you to pick one.
Invite.
I'm going to invite you to pick one to answer. You can choose to answer both if you'd like, but if you only want to answer one, you can pick one to answer. So I'm going to read both. So the first one is, what are the biggest things you learned about yourself as a result of the pandemic? That's question number 1. Question number 2, what are 3 wishes that you have for the world right now? Those are the 2 questions. Would you like me to repeat them?
No. I think I want to do the pandemic one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What are the biggest things you've learned about yourself as a result of the pandemic?
Wow. So I'll say this, that the pandemic was very triggering for me. I spent a lot of time in my apartment looking out the window, watching Black Lives Matter pass by and people without masks. And it really triggered for me a sense of not belonging, of not being safe. And so the anxiety was very real for me. And the recent trip to Africa and staying as long as I did in Africa was really me recovering from that. And so the gift of the pandemic was really me checking myself and checking myself in, and being in a space where I could listen to myself, where I could learn again how to breathe, to learn again who I am and my ability to keep my own self centered. During the pandemic, I broke up with my partner, someone who's my best business associate, no longer was associating with me. One of my best friends died. My sister and I had a big altercation. So I was pretty much alone in the apartment a lot. And so finding your big came out of the Bloom community gathering and meeting and all of this kind of stuff. And so the book was written out of that. But in the background of it, I was dealing with a lot. And so now I feel like I can deal with that. I have some tools. So it gave me some tools to negotiate anxiety, to negotiate not having, to negotiate life's impossibilities. Yeah. And
Wow.
the biggest lesson is I'm possible. I'm beyond. I had to get out of my body and become bigger than who I'd known myself to be, to survive this time. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for answering that.
Well, you did ask.
Thank you for
Okay.
answering. Well, you could have picked the other one, but but thank you for
You're welcome.
picking that one and answering that one. And thank you for being here with us this evening. I just want to turn to Glenn to see if there's anything that you want to ask
Well,
OLUBODE Shawn Brown
I
before
just
we
I just want to actually acknowledge, and I want to actually go back to the declaration. The last line of the declaration says, "We declare that our community manifests itself in the world as a contribution in the transformation of the universe." And Olubode, to me, your work is an expression of that transformation. And
Thank
so I've watched you, learned from you, and am delighted at what you have put together to support other people of Black African descent around the planet. And I so appreciate where you are and where you're headed. And thank you for being part of my life, all the way back from PDEG to the first International Black Summit, and to now to Bloom. I've been to one or two events, party events, I might add, and just love the energy that you, the energy and the space that you provide for people to be themselves, to just come and be themselves powerfully. So thank you for the continued work that you do. I love you, my brother. And
Thank you, Glenn. It's been a pleasure.
you know,
I received that acknowledgement fully. Reflection, something here. I just want to hold up my two books, Bloom the Sexual
absolutely.
Journey and Finding Your Big. Please go to my website and check out the programs. It's Bloom Education Institute, bloomeducation.institute. So not .com, Bloom Education .institute, where we're exploring the elemental frameworks that keep us blooming. Check out Finding Your Big. Enter Create Space is a global community of 5 million creatives worldwide that we're building. We're going to be supporting each other in manifesting and realizing our possibilities through our big impossible goals. Jackie Grace, it's a pleasure. Thank you for those questions. Wow.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, my brother.
And don't go anywhere. So we are going to complete the podcast. But for those of you who are listening or who are watching later on YouTube, we do have a Q&A that we have with the live audience after we stop the recording. So we're going to shift to that now.
And just want to give them our website, Black Summit.
Please do.
www.blacksummit.org, so you can get more information about the International Black Summit. We have an annual event that occurs the first full weekend in August every year. This is going to be our 33rd year or 34th, I'm not even sure. And we have other events that we have as well. So check out the site and you can find out a little bit more about the International Black Summit. And Shawn OLUBODE Brown has been somebody who's been there at the first. 1991. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good night.